So the S in SOAR means select. Now, you may be presented with information in many different ways. Maybe you've got a textbook that you have to read that's sentences and paragraphs, or maybe the professor gives you a lecture with a PowerPoint presentation, and so the information might come in different forms. But you have to, when you're studying that information, it's just a big amorphous blob, okay? And you have to shape it up. You have to find out what's important out of this haystack of information. What's really the golden information? What's important? And to do so, I would ask myself when I'm studying, what am I supposed to learn? That's what's important. That's what's most important. What am I supposed to learn? Now, sometimes you have to ask the professor for information to help you figure that out, because maybe your professor has some learning goals for your course, your particular course, or a particular lesson within that course that's going to be followed by an exam. And if you understand what the goals of that lesson are, you're going to be able to identify what's important among all the stuff that you're supposed to read and listen to and otherwise take in. So don't be afraid to ask the professor that. Now, don't say, will this be on the test, or what's going to be on the test? Professors don't like it when you ask that, because they think what you're really saying when you say that is, how can I figure out only the stuff that there'll be test questions so I don't have to learn anything else? And they think that's pretty sad. So that's not what you're asking, though. What you're really asking is, what is it that we're trying to accomplish in this class? What is the goal? What are the goals for what I'm supposed to learn? Because certainly that will be what will be on the test. But if I understand what the goals are, I can zero in on that information and I can make sure that I learn that. And that's what I want to do. And so your professor will be very happy to help you with that. So ask, and then zero in on the information that's important when you read and study. Well, how are you going to zero in on that information? Well, you can organize. The O is for organize in SOAR. And by organize, we really mean that you should change it into another format. So if it comes to you as sentences and paragraphs, as it might in a textbook, change it. You could change it into lists or outlines or notes about what's important. You know, if you zero in on what's important in those paragraphs. Or you might make some graphic representations of important ideas in there, like tables. If you had to compare different concepts, maybe you'd put the two concepts at the top of the page, draw a line between them, and then go down comparing them, how they're alike or different on different various points. That would be a nice table to make that'll help you really understand the concepts and own that information. A history class and maybe many other classes, timelines might be useful into giving you perspective on something you're trying to learn. Or diagrams would be good for that. Charts are wonderful tools for understanding data. And concept maps are when you take the concepts and display them graphically and draw lines between them to show how they're connected to each other. And that really helps you to understand the concepts better when you think about how they're connected to concepts you already know and the new concepts that you're learning. Here's an example of a concept map, a very simple one. And the A in SOAR is for associate. And the reason you might use a concept map is to associate one idea or concept with another idea or concept. So in this example, this was a marriage and family class, and the students were learning about different types of marriage around the world. So they found out that there were some general categories of types of marriage. Monogamy, which is where only two people are married, and polygamy, where more than two people, there are more than two spouses in the definition of what a marriage is. But it doesn't stop there. Actually, there are different types of polygyny, where a husband has multiple wives, or polyandry, where a wife has multiple husbands. And there are different types of monogamy, strict monogamy, and serial monogamy. So what the student has done here is started with the idea of types of marriage, and then branched out from that into the other concepts that are also terms that they're learning that were perhaps new to them, and then branching out from those terms to explain those in more detail. So if you understand the difference between, if you think about the different types of monogamy, it helps you understand monogamy better. And the different types of marriage, polygamy and polyandry, and monogamy and polygamy, that helps you understand types of marriage better. Okay. And then you want to regulate, and that's where you test yourself. So a popular way that students use to test themselves is to make flashcards, and the way that you might have done that, even when you were in high school, would be to write a term on one side of an index card and the definition on the other side. Well, that's good. You could still do that, but if you rely entirely on that as a method for studying in college, you're going to fall behind eventually, because what's going to happen is the longer you're in college, the less the emphasis will be on memorizing definitions, and the more the emphasis will be on understanding concepts and making sense of how one concept relates to another concept. Or, when you understand different concepts, what course of action might you take based on those concepts? So that's higher level thinking. Now, are there terms that you need to memorize? There probably are some. If you're in a biology class, you're probably going to have to memorize a lot of new terms, because you can't really talk about, say, mitosis, unless you know all the names of all the parts associated with that, right? And within a cell. So you do have to memorize some of those terms, but then you have to understand the concept and use those terms to describe it. If you're studying anatomy and physiology, you might have a lot of terms that you have to memorize, and that are new to you, so memorizing them is appropriate in that context. But then when you move on to courses like history and sociology and psychology, you're going to find, and in the higher levels of biology and so on, you're going to find that you're going to see less and less questions on exams about terms. There'll be many fewer questions where it just has a definition and asks you which term matches the definition. And instead, it'll have a concept or an idea, and it'll ask you what term represents that idea, what concept represents that idea. And so that's very different from just knowing the definition, because the definition won't be there on the question. And you have to understand the concept well enough and know the definitions well enough that you can think about what the things mean and be able to identify it from that. And that's even in a multiple choice type question. But imagine how much more so that'll be true when you have short answer and essay questions and papers to write about these things. Okay, so what you want to do then is add to the idea of learning definitions, add the idea of understanding concepts. And you could do that with flashcards too, because you can write a concept on one side, and then on the other side write examples of that concept, or write out the meaning of it in your own words, so that you can come up with examples. Now, if you can't think of an example for the term or concept, then you probably don't understand that concept well enough to take the test. And you should ask about it in class so that you understand it, get it straight, and then study that once you've figured it out. And you got to do all that before the test. After the test, it's too late, right? So test yourself. And when you find you don't understand something, you can ask questions about it in class. Test yourself on a regular basis, several times a week, leading up to an exam, not just the night before a test. If you're writing a paper, test yourself by proofreading that paper, by going over the paper and making sure there's no mistakes. Sometimes you have to ask someone else to read it, look at it, because you read it and you don't see the mistakes because you connect the dots in your mind and you don't realize there's mistakes on the paper. And then a friend of yours looks at it, and immediately they see, hey, look, you say the dog barked, there's 2 these there, and you read that 6 times and you didn't see it because your mind just went zip right over it. But when somebody else looks at it, they can help you with that. And also, if you have issues trying to describe things or figuring out the best way to write things, or you got issues about grammar, go to the ACE and get help with that, okay? Or if you're testing yourself by doing practice math problems and you come to a type of problem that's difficult for you that you're having trouble with, go to the ACE and let them help you with that one problem. And once you understand that, you're ready to move on to additional problems and different types of problems. So, and that way you don't get behind. So S, select what's important. O, reorganize it graphically. A, associate the different concepts. And R, regulate or test yourself before you actually take a real test given by the professor or before you submit the paper to be graded. So this is your plan. So plan your work and then work your plan. All right, thank you.